This is Colin Faver on Kiss FM. My very special guest tonight is Peter Ford, the man behind Baby Ford. Good evening, Peter.
All right.
Thank you for coming in.
Welcome.
Right, let's go back to your roots. Where did you spend your youth? Where did you actually grow up? And when did you first begin making music?
Well, I was born, obviously.
Yeah.
Near Manchester, Bolton, in fact. Started going out in around 1978, around about sort of punk rock. But I sort of avoided a lot of the punk clubs and started going to a lot of the gay clubs in Manchester and sort of a lot of the sort of disco sort of places, you know, and started getting into that sort of music rather than...
You went into the more sort of alternative types of music?
Well, yeah, I was into that as well, but it was kind of like, I don't know, it just felt more natural for me to be into more sort of maybe New York disco and things like that.
So when did you actually start playing?
I started playing in my bedroom, as most people do, when I was about 12. Started playing in bands when I was about 13, and then sort of progressed into when I moved down to London, which was about 5 years ago.
Right. Working
with like MIDI studios, with Mr. Salt at the garage, you know, things like that.
Who is the mysterious Mr. Salt?
Mr. Salt. Richard Salt. He's my kind of sidekick programmer, you know. We also work on co-production together on the new album.
So did you actually meet him when you first moved to London, or had you known him before that?
Well, when I first moved to London, I had to sort of find somewhere to live first of all, so that was kind of a big challenge. And once I found my sort of like abode, I started to look around for people to work with, because I had like a head full of ideas, you know. Mm-hmm. So that's around about that time I met Richard, and we went into his little garage and made a record called Oochie Coochie.
And did you actually already had a name? Was Baby Ford, did Baby Ford exist before that, or how did that name come about?
Well, at the time when Oochie Coochie was done, I think it was DJ Jesus and Dr. God, I think it was, and it was called, well, I can't say what it was called, but it was called FU, I think, something like that.
Right.
And shortly after that, I sort of hooked up with Rhythm King, and we put out about 100 one-sided copies of Oochie Coochie, which if you got one, then well done.
Okay, let's listen to the first single. This is Baby Ford, Oochie Coochie. Baby Ford, Oochie Coochie, my special guest tonight, Peter Ford. How did, evidently, Oochie Coochie, there was actually a warning given out with that record because it was pressed so loudly. The bass was loud, blowing up people's faces.
That's right, yeah. A lot of people thought that was a kind of a hype, but in fact it cost me 30 quid in bass speakers at home. And I didn't want to get into any problems with people complaining about it, so I just thought we put the ear on with do not play maximum volume, otherwise you're going to get sued by everybody and his mother, you know. So
right.
I just did that as a sort of to cover me and my financial losses.
I remember the first time we played it at Heaven, in fact, the bass bins blew there.
Yeah, it was like I couldn't go out without somebody like complaining to me saying, "What are you doing to this bloody sound system?"
And that was before LFO. A long time. How did you actually link up with Rhythm King in the first place?
Well, I knew Mark more, and I'd sort of gone into them with some ideas, and among those ideas was Oochie Coochie, because that was recorded before I met them. We just decided to try that out on a promo, and ever since then it's been rolling along.
Was it a long-term deal you signed at the time, or was it just a one-off thing?
Well, you know, we sort of took it as it went at the time, and as the ideas came, sort of developed along whatever line we decided to take, you know.
Right.
I mean, that's still the situation really with the new stuff.
Well, the next release was the first album, in fact, 4 tracks, which for me was quite an important release in the development of UK house music. And who were your influences at that time? Because listening to it, I could detect quite a lot of sort of Detroit sound there.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's if you listen to Four Trace, it's obvious that a lot of the influences are like kind of American-based, Chicago, Detroit sort of house acts. Also, I was kind of tapping into what was happening in the clubs in around about 98, 90, and 88, 89. So I think it was a moment of inspiration for me to sort of make that record. That record was made in about 3 or 4 weeks in between making Who the World of Baby Forward. I just took a month off to do that in the garage.
Right. Well, the track we're going to play is Flowers. Tell me about this.
Flowers. Do you know the SK1, Casio SK1?
Right.
I'm sure you do. Well, the SK1, the Casio SK1 is like a real low-budget sampler. It allows you to sample for about 2 seconds, something really, really low quality. The track started off with me just saying like flowers, and then just started playing tunes, and like the brass ensemble was the main riff and things like that. It just developed from there. It was done in about 5 hours, the whole thing. So I quite like things to be spontaneous. So here it is.
This is Flowers.
Colin Faver, Kiss 100
This is Colin Faver on Kiss FM. My special guest tonight, Peter Ford, the main man behind Baby Ford. Your next single, Children of the Revolution, was a cover version. In fact, the first one you've actually released. What was the reason behind doing that?
Well, I was kind of in the studio doing Who the World of Baby Ford, and I kept getting all these like music press papers saying like, you know, acid backlash and blah blah blah. And I wanted to do a cover version on this album, so Children of the Revolution seemed to be quite apt. So I wanted to sort of update the sort of idea of a rock song into more of a house kind of track.
Right.
I mean, maybe, I don't know if it worked quite as well as it could have at the time, but it seemed to mature quite well with age. And I'm quite happy I did it now.
Yeah, because nobody else was doing that at the time, sort of blending the two, like dance music and your more alternative stuff together.
Yeah, it's kind of a taboo area. I think that the more cross-cultured ideas that people have when they make music, the better for the future.
Right. Children of the Revolution, Baby Ford. How do you feel about the way dance music has progressed since the early days?
I mean, I like the way it's progressed at the moment. It seems to have got back down to a basic kind of energy, which is something that I've always believed is the way to sort of create new ideas. You know, I don't like to badmouth any kind of music, really. There's no point. There's other things to worry about in life, you know. So I'm quite happy with the way it's going. You know, energy creates new ideas, you know. And
do you hear a lot of the new releases, like the white labels that come out every week, and the Belgian music and the Italian?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, of course. I mean, it's part of my life. You know, it's something that I really, really value. It's also, you know, really big inspiration on what I do as well. You know, because everything you hear indirectly is going to like indirectly influence you in what you do. You know, so I do really believe that music's like a soundtrack for people's lives. And that's often the reason why things are successful, because it relates to them, you know.
Going back to cover versions, are there any more songs that you'd like to do in the future?
Well, I was thinking of doing like I Want to Be Your Dog on the last album,
Iggy
Pop, but I kind of got off that tip.
Right.
I thought I'd be more spontaneous and original.
You originally signed Rhythm King for your songwriting abilities.
That's what I'm saying, yeah.
Performance, yeah.
That's what it says in the press release.
How about writing for other artists? Have you ever tried?
Maybe I'll have more time in the future to do that. It's been so hectic over the last 3 years, like with going to America and sort of just making like 3 albums, you know, is quite a task. So maybe in the future, yeah, I will.
Beach Bump was the next single. That's got quite a strong Euro feel to it. What was the inspiration behind that track?
I think, again, you know, going back to what I was saying about the clubs in Manchester that I used to attend, you know, a lot of the reason why I used to attend these clubs was because the other clubs that I used to go to were so aggressive, and it was just like, you know, oi mate, you know, sort of thing. So I'm just really not into that kind of trip. So I got into a lot of that kind of Euro disco sort of feel, and I wanted to sort of like do something that was very synthy and very kind of, you know, quite in that mode, but in a new sort of way. So that's when Beach Bum arrived.
I know it's kind of a difficult question, but what sparks you into writing a new song, and how do you actually work in the studio? Do you go in there with a basic chorus, or do you go in there with a rhythm track? Or
a lot of the time it's like I'll be lying in bed and it'll be just an idea about a subject or a mood of a track, you know, because I think translating a mood is probably one of the most important things in the area that I work. So I try and translate a mood and make it so it works in some kind of way. Like I say, it's very, very up in the air. I don't necessarily work like A, B, C, D. Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, a lot of it like is a kind of bouncing ideas around in the studio with whoever's around at the time as well. And just like when it happens, that's when I want to record it.
Right. The second album, The World of Baby Ford, how long did that take you to put together?
Too long. It wasn't a month, that one. It was about 4 months, 5 months.
Were you happy with the results?
I was happy with a lot of the results, especially Pouring for Wigan.
Which is the track we're going to play? What inspired it?
Another part of my sort of background was the Wigan Casino, because I grew up near the Wigan Casino. And
home of Northern Soul.
Home of all that. It was kind of like a point where I was about 14, and I was sort of one of my first sort of experiences with big loud sort of speakers, big sort of dance floors and a lot of people. And it just seemed very relevant to what was going on at that time, again with house music and techno. And there's a spoken sort of narrative vocal in there that sort of explains the way they felt about the Northern Soul scene, and the way that it was kind of looked upon as being quite unorthodox and rebellious. I just thought it was quite revolutionary, and I just thought it was relevant to what was going on in house music.
This is Baby Ford and Pouring for Wigan.
And enjoy it because it's just not an enjoyable experience. But if you're working in some very tedious job, you don't want to look forward to something that could go wrong anyway. Just from the community sense, well, it brightens up the people's lives who go. If you go to Wigan on a Saturday night, stop there all night, don't come home till 12 o'clock the next day, people think we're crazy, or there's something going on there. They're not willing to accept it and say, oh, they probably have a very good time doing that. But I think there's something wrong with the world, really.
After the album came out, there was quite a long gap before the next single, Change. Any special reason for that? You were off touring in America, I believe.
Yeah, I went off to America for a while. Sounds a bit rock and roll, but it was in fact quite an eye-opening experience.
Were you actually touring with Erasure, was it?
Yeah, with Erasure. So it was like I did a UK tour of like clubs like the Zap, the Hacienda Sub Club in Glasgow and places like that. And then as soon as I got off that, Erasure asked me to go over to America to do like a stadium tour, which was like a different ball game, as you can imagine. So like arriving in San Francisco was like a 10,000 sort of packed auditorium. Unfortunately, the computer crashed on the first night, so we had to blow that one out. But after that, yeah, I kind of got into the aeroplane flights, and so I decided to stay on and do gigs at the Sound Factory and sort of the Los Angeles Shrine and things like that. It was quite an eye-opening experience.
How did you find the American audience compares to the British audience?
Well, it's very different, you know. I think the way that the American sort of culture is structured, it's very, very different. You know, I find. I mean, first of all, it was a real big culture shock for me. Mm. You know, especially when I hit back in London, it was like, what is that all about? You know what I mean? It was like for 2 weeks I was lying in my bed with my mouth open. What was that? You know?
Yeah.
I don't really understand the way their society is. But I mean, I can relate to the alternative one that's surrounding the clubs, because they're just into what I'm into, you know.
Did you get inspired over there to write songs?
Yeah, that's where Change came around. I was playing Crashing in Cleveland, and it sounds really, really corny, but I started to sing Change over the top. It sounded really nice, so I recorded it when I got back to London.
How do you feel comfortable in a live situation? I mean, is it something you intend to do when the album comes out? Is there going to be live dates?
I think it's quite difficult to get a live sort of show that works within the area that I work in at the moment. There seems to be quite a lot of narrow-mindedness as far as maybe record companies and promoters go. It's kind of like, what do you want? You know, DATs, playback, or like want to do it all sequenced, and it's very low budget usually. So I'm trying to create a new way of doing it at the moment. No, I don't want to say too much about that. Maybe you'll just have to wait and see. I'll just arrive unannounced.
I always find it's difficult when you're actually playing dance music live, because a lot of people don't know what to do, whether to stand and watch you or to carry on dancing.
It's the old tradition, you know. It's like dance music to an extent has had a faceless image. For some reason that's stuck in people's heads. It's not necessarily something that can be changed.
You remixed S Express, Mantra for a State of Mind, during that period as well.
Yeah.
How did that come about?
I just really liked Mantra for a State of Mind, you know, the song, and I could see the way the vocal melodies were really, really entwined, you know. I really liked that. And when I was asked to do it, I just sort of went for it, and it turned out probably the nearest kind of result that I've ever wanted to have on a remix like that, you know. I mean, I've not done many remixes due to my own sort of reasons, but that was a real earth mover.
Is it something you'd like to do more of in the future? Remix other people's?
Possibly, if I get more time, yeah.
And how about producing other artists?
Again, you know, if I get more time, I'd love to do that.
Right. The new album has taken about a year to write and record, or
6 months? 6 months. Yeah. Where does this come from?
Did you actually go into the studio with material already, or was it a case of putting it together as you went along?
No, I went in the studio with more or less an empty sheet of paper. I wanted to do it from the start to the finish, and it was a kind of soul-searching experience.
Who did you work with?
Mr. Salt. He was like kind of isolated, submerged into like a bank of synths.
Just the two of you?
The odd sort of backing vocalist and things like that, but I really wanted to do it isolated. Like, none of the other ones had been like that. It was always like I'd done a few tracks and then B-sides and then compile it. This was like a whole body of work that from start to finish ran quite well. It's taken a lot of influence from mainly house music and techno.
Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, that was a 2-day track. It was inspired, and I asked Christian Bolan to remix
That's from
the track.
R&S Records in Belgium.
Yeah. And it's turned out quite nice. I think it kind of works on a very basic level. On the B-side, there's going to be an instrumental and the original mix, the 2-day mix. So check it out.
This is Baby Ford, In Your Blood. This is Colin Faver on Kiss FM. My special guest tonight, Peter Ford, the man behind Baby Ford. Before the break, you heard the brand new single, In Your Blood. When's that actually coming out?
Well, it's going to be probably promoted for the next 3 or 4 weeks.
Right.
And then after that, you know, it'll probably be released officially.
Was there any special reason why you used Christian Bolan to remix it? Do you like the music coming out of Belgium?
Yeah, I mean, I really liked Horsepower, and I just thought, you know, sometimes you play records and you think this is really kind of going to work on something like this, and I spoke to Christian and he was into the idea, so it was one of those things where it just happened, you know. I'd like to get, you know, like other remixes on the tracks, the singles, because sometimes when you're working on an album you get so like close to the material you can't be objective. Sometimes it works out quite interesting when other people come in fresh and give it their input.
Right. Well, this album's actually coming out on a new label, In Submission. Is that your label?
Yeah, it's going to be in submission via Transglobal Records.
Via Rhythm King.
Yeah. It's kind of starting off a new a new kind of area which I'm interested in. You know, it'll probably start with the Baby Forward stuff and then hopefully develop into other things.
So you'll be looking for other artists, maybe?
I'm not necessarily looking, you know, if things cross my path, then that's the way fate goes, you know, that will be the way of the world.
Studio technology has changed a great deal since you actually first began making music. Has that affected the way you record at all?
Well, funnily enough, it's not changed drastically, because the first time I was in the studio with doing Uchi Coochie, it was just like a MIDI setup with samples and drum machines and synths linked up to the sort of MIDI sort of circuitry and everything. If you know what MIDI is, obviously, you understand what I'm talking about. So it's not changed drastically. I still, you know, really believe that a good idea is better than a hell of a lot of equipment.
Right. Do you think it's a good thing that the equipment's become a lot more available to people? So, for instance, it's a lot easier to create a single in your bedroom nowadays than it was.
Well, anything that enables people to express an idea, you know, whatever it is, whichever art form it is always a good thing, you know, for this country and for the sort of the people that are working within it. It can't be bad. You know, the more accessible the equipment is and the more easy it is to make something creative, the better for us all.
How do you feel about sampling?
I feel good about it.
You don't mind people sampling your music?
I love them sampling my music.
That's good to hear. Blowback is the next track we're going to play from the album. Tell me about that.
Blowback is melodic as opposed to hardcore. It just kind of takes you on a little journey, and I think that's probably all that I can say about that.
Okay, let's listen. Have you got much pressure from Rhythm King to actually come up with a hit single? And have you had deadlines to work with? I mean, when it comes to new albums and things, have they given you a deadline to come up with a product?
Well, I make my own deadlines. You know, it's good to be kind of fairly strict with that. It's not so much pressure to come up with hit singles. It's when something happens that's good. You know, it's a feeling throughout the whole you know company, and we tend to go with it. Like I say, I'm working much more independently with Trans Global and things like that, so we're sort of trying to create a more imaginative, alternative sort of feeling to the whole label. You
must find it frustrating that it takes so long from the time you actually finish recording something before it hits the streets.
Yeah, especially an album, you know, because you go in sort of blind on an album. It's not like doing a track, you know, you maybe been down to a club the night before and you want to make a track that's like got you inspired from the night before or something. You know, whatever feelings you had that night, you want to try and translate it into some kind of musical form, you know.
Right.
So what tends to happen is you've got to trust your own instincts to an extent, which involves foresight and confidence in what you're doing. Yeah, you know, like B49, the new album was like I say, a whole big experience for me. It was like a total soul search.
Talking of going to clubs, you used to do it a lot. Do you still do it?
Yeah, all the time.
So which particular clubs do you like at the moment?
The ones that make me feel good. Whoever rings me up, you know, and says, well, I'm doing this, if the DJ's right, you know, if the vibe's right, I'll do it, you know. Let's go.
Not mentioning any names, like Heaven, for instance. Where do you see dance music going to next? I mean, at the moment it seems to be splitting up again into sort of hardcore and garage. And, I mean, what do you see happening in the future?
I think that, you know, like I said earlier, the energy within hardcore and like acid, in the earlier days of acid, you know, is always going to be a base for new ideas. So anything that's got energy and inspiration is going to work, you know, as long as it's not going retrospective on anything that's, you know, you can take influences from the past, but not necessarily rehash an old concept.
The next track we're going to play from the album is a big favourite of mine, actually, at the moment. Move On. Tell me about this.
Move On. Yeah, it was worked on for about 3 days and it wasn't going anywhere. It was just like a real headache. And suddenly I just got this kind of like idea for a vocal and then sort of like tried it out and it worked, and all the vocals were just all over the track. It was just a real mess. And about, like I was saying about remixes, I gave it to Kurt Rogers, who's putting stuff out through Rhythm King at the moment, and he did a really good mix of it, so it worked.
This is Baby Ford and Move On. Get yours, get out. Baby Forward and Move On, a track from the new album, forthcoming on In Submission Records. What other recording artists do you listen to? What sort of music do you listen to at home? Anything special? Yeah,
I mean, obviously a lot of the sort of techno and hardcore, and probably more recently things like Thrill Kill Cult, KMFDM, like stuff on Transglobal, Sheep on Drugs, things like that, Joy. Lots and lots of different things, like lots of influences. You can't really pin any one thing down, I think it's good to have a mixing pot of ideas and just do your own thing around it.
Is there any other people you'd really like to work with?
I was probably thinking about, me and Carl Craig was talking quite a while back.
Carl Craig from Detroit.
Yeah, about maybe working on some things together. Maybe we'll get together with that sometime. Mm-hmm. I hope. Maybe, Carl, you can give me a call.
You like the underground resistance stuff?
Yeah, I'm really into underground resistance. I mean, it's fresh, it's coming from America, it's the future, maybe.
Because a lot of people thought that America had sort of been left behind recently, but...
Well, I mean, I was talking to Mike from Underground Resistance the other week, and I don't know, they seem to be like into crossing ideas, like British ideas, American ideas, and coming up with new ideas.
Sure.
So that's the way it is, that's the way it goes. If you get on the right track with ideas like that, you're not going to go far wrong.
The final track we're going to play from the album is Disco Noddy.
Disco Noddy.
Disco Noddy. Let's hear it.
I want to see you get down.
Baby Ford and Disco Noddy from the new album B Ford 9, which was due to be released when?
I'll be working on that and then probably spend a little bit of time in America again. And then, who knows what the wind will bring.
Okay, Pete. Well, thanks very much for coming in and talking to us.
Yeah, it's been deep.
We wish you lots of luck in the future. Hope the album goes well.
Yeah, same to you.
Okay, bye.